Oogway. Sisyphus is taking the position that hot dogs are sandwiches, and Master Oogway is opposing. At the end, if there is no concession, we will vote the winner via poll. To both competitors, good luck.
Hello. Thank you for joining, everyone. My online handle is Sisyphus. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Arthuria server, to the staff for the server, and the staff to moderation, and to my esteemed colleague and opponent today, Master Oogway. Today, I will be making the case that a hot dog, that is to say, a hot dog on a designated hot dog bun, is categorized as a sandwich. We find ourselves faced with a very serious question on food categorization. The specific question today is, as I mentioned earlier, some may doubt the importance of that topic, but for context, I would like to add that this has been reviewed for legal purposes and is considered a serious topic, unlike some would suggest. Not to be confused with a major source for argumentation, but I have attached a link to a Minnesota Law Review article on exactly this topic. I will be presenting two arguments today. The first argument will be containing 4 citations. The second argument will be using a single source. With that, I conclude my opening statement.
Thank you. Formal introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to present my opposition to the proposition stating that hot dogs are sandwiches. My online handle is Master Oogway, and in my presentation, I'll be presenting one argument for which successful presentation I'll be using up to 9 citations and 1 expert introduction. My argument will rely on presenting definition ambiguity, after which I will try to emboss a definition that will serve to show the validity of my argumentation. With this, I conclude my opening statement and formally surrender the word to my opposition.
Thank you, Oogway. I would like to begin the first argument with argument by definition. There are multiple definitions that we could go with here, and I will be posting all of these sources that I'll be using here. The first 2 are Merriam-Webster's definitions of sandwich and open-faced sandwich. Once posted, I will be reviewing these. Give me one moment. Now, the standard definition for sandwich, according to Merriam-Webster, is indeed 2 or more slices of bread or a split roll having a filling between, or 1B, 1 slice of bread covered with food having an open-faced sandwich, with 1 slice of bread instead of 2, mustard instead of butter, and some vegetable sticks. Or definition 2, something resembling a sandwich, especially composite structural material consisting of layers, often of high strength facings, bonded to a low strength central core. The definition for open-faced sandwich is a piece of bread that is covered with meat, cheese, etc., or a sandwich made with no bread on top. The definition, according to Wordnik, also follows 2 or more slices of bread with a filling, such as meat or cheese, placed between them, or a partly split long and round roll containing a filling, or 1 slice of bread covered with a filling, or something resembling a sandwich. And lastly, the dictionary definition, that is dictionary.com, is 2 or more slices of bread with a layer of meat, fish, cheese, etc. between them. Also in the dictionary.com definition is a open sandwich, or something resembling or suggesting a sandwich as something in horizontal layers. With that, I conclude my first argument. My second argument is argument by common sense. Inside of debate chat, I'll be posting Exhibit A. Exhibit A are 2 food items that I've constructed today. The first of which is a single piece of bread that has been cut in half with peanut butter in between. The second, on the left, is a single piece of bread with peanut butter inside that has been folded in half. I think any appeal to common sense, any suggestion that the average person would suggest that the folded bread is not a sandwich is absurd, and that in order to be intelligible in describing what the second food item is, we must call it a sandwich. With this, I conclude my second argument.
Yeah, I will just stop for the sake of etiquette. You don't have to mute yourself for this part. It was amazing. You did really, really good. Well done, truly. Now I'll proceed to actual argumentation. That was really masterful. Well done. So, thank you for your presentation. Now I'll proceed to presentation of my argument. So, before a formal argumentation, I will be presenting ambiguity of definition for sandwich via the dictionary definition. I'll be not presenting additional sources for the definition of sandwich that are against my position, because my opposition has already done so. I'll be using additional citation from different dictionaries which present the conflict in the definition, and as such will be presenting ambiguity that will proceed to move the dictionary definitions from the use in the debate. So just a second. I'll be now posting my additional definitions. I'll be explaining the importance of the conflict. What? One. Okay, 1, 2, and 3 should be enough. Now, all of these three presentations of the definition in a dictionary specify explicitly that a sandwich is an item consisting of 2 or more pieces of bread. Such is so is the definition that precedes the conflict of my presentation, and I am moving to remove the dictionary definitions from the official argumentations. Now that I have presented such an ambiguity, I will proceed to present ambiguity in legal definitions and introduce an expert testimony to collaborate the definition of operation, which will be needed to validate my argumentation. In the chat, Sisyphus has already presented the link which is necessary. I'll be presenting an image which will be of importance to the actual proceeding. It is from that specified link. It is such as so. In this paragraph, in the official legal proceedings, USDA, the Department of Agriculture in United States of America, defined hot dog as a sandwich type or a sandwich-like figure, which by itself is similar to sandwich, but they are not actually considered a sandwich. So it's a separate entity entirely. To contradiction of such, there are 2 states in America, California and New York, which are also specified in the link, that present the opposite of the legal definition presented by the Minnesota ruling, and as such, I am moving to dismiss legal definitions from the use in argumentation thus forward. And such, I am left to use the expert testimony to present a definition which will be used in the proceeding. Just a second, I have to copy paste it. Here you go. It's expert testimony from an official ruling in a what's called law proceedings, and for my use, point 3 will be of imperative value, which states a sandwich is of European roots and is generally recognized in our industry as 2 pieces of leavened bread. So in the industry, most prominent definition, which will be to my benefit in my argumentations, is the one that specifies a sandwich as 2 pieces of leavened bread. With that said, I will proceed with the official. I forgot to mention in the affidavit, this is a Christopher Schlartigen. He is a professional in a culinary industry with many accolades in the industry. With that said, I will proceed to address the definition of a hot dog, which is necessary for procedural argumentation. I have not officially found any ambiguity in definition for hot dog, so I'll present the necessary requirement as a ruling definition, specifically that it is a food product served in a form of bread roll. Bread roll is or Frankfurter for European people. Frankfurter is a form of a bread roll. Bread roll is one piece of bread, and to remove all doubt, I will introduce a mathematical law of path connection, which will serve as a presentation of what means to be two pieces or more pieces of one thing. If scoop conflict or an item is possibly to be constructed such that is path connected, then it is one entity of that item. If it is path disconnected, then it is considered multiple pieces of the same item. So in our presentation, hot dog is the bun, which is a one piece of bread with one piece of bread, and as such is mathematically considered path connected, making it one piece. Now I will proceed to the formal argumentation. With the definitions of imperative specificities set, I'll present my argument following it. Since the requirement for a sandwich is two pieces and hot dog is made of one piece of bread, I conclude that hot dog is, by the definition, not a sandwich. With this, I conclude my presentation of argumentation and surrender the word to my opposition. And as opposition has already presented his official presentation, I appeal to that we proceed to the formal discussion.
I'd like to thank my colleague and opponent, Master Oogway, for presenting argumentation. If I understand correctly, this is the point where we have a back and forth discussion, or is this the point where I make a counter argument?
In this part, either you or me first take the defensive side or attacking side against the opposition argumentation. So if you wish to take the first, you can take attacking side, attacking my argumentation, and I'll be taking defensive side. In this part, I am not allowed to present any attacks against your presentation. So until your attack is exhausted, you are on the attack. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
Okay, you may proceed. I'll be taking defensive.
I'd first like to address the idea that ambiguity is somehow a grounds to completely remove the definition of sandwich. First and foremost, the argument relies on some level of intelligibility in describing the world. We have to be able to categorize the world around us, and merely having separate definitions for things that disagree with each other do not completely remove the fact that we have to be able to describe the world around us. You give a few examples of definitions that don't include any resemblance clause inside of them. However, inside of your third source, I believe, despite the fact that it makes a distinction between open and closed-faced sandwiches, it does consider both of these things as still sandwiches. It also makes a concession that hamburgers and frankfurters are sandwich types and not traditional sandwiches. However, being a type of sandwich is still a sandwich. And even if they are merely resembling sandwiches, they still adhere to the initial definitions of a thing that resembles a sandwich.
Sorry to interrupt. Which definition are you referring to? I would like to collaborate.
Of course. The definition I was referring to, multiple actually make this statement that it is simply something that resembles a sandwich. So the Merriam-Webster definition, definition
you said
2.
In my presentation that there exists a definition which is contrary to my presentation. So which one is it? Is it lexical?
The image that begins with other legal definitions do not resolve the ambiguity. It is the sentence that's preceded by citation number 19, and it says hamburgers and frankfurters are sandwich types.
Oh, in the legal definition.
Yes.
Oh, okay. My confusion. Apologies. You may proceed.
And then a bit further on, it says, thus food items that are more difficult to characterize as sandwiches are labeled as sandwich-like or sandwich type.
Yes, I'm
indicating that although similar to a sandwich, they are not actually sandwiches. But I would concede, or I would argue that
Mm-hmm.
being sandwich-like precisely follows the definitions as earlier that I presented
Definitions by the
through
dictionaries?
Merriam-Webster. Yes, definition by the dictionaries. In addition, if we were to truly see it be the case that these are not sandwiches, we would not see official authorities recognizing them as sandwiches. So while there is some nebulous nature to the definitions themselves, simply being within the ballpark of a sandwich seems to constitute sufficient reason to consider them sandwiches. So that would
if
be.
I may formalize this in a way so that I don't misinterpret in my defense, you are saying just because they are sandwich-like and sandwich type, indicated by the law of what was it, Minnesota?
No, I'm not. Unless your legal article is from Minnesota, I don't know what the source on this is.
I think it's from Minnesota. It's Minnesota Law Review. It is a Minnesota case, but it's not really relevant. So just because legal proceeding defines it as sandwich-like and sandwich type, which it by its own admission explains as categorically different from a sandwich, they are by definitions of dictionaries as you presented still sufficiently similar to a sandwich to be considered sandwiches. Is that your argumentation?
Yes, that is the position I'm taking. And I would argue that it must be the case by referencing the legal citation from the affidavit from your expert.
Okay. Let me check. Okay. Which point specifically?
So referencing point 3,
okay.
The concession is made. A sandwich is of European roots and is generally recognized in our industry as 2 pieces of leavened bread with something in between, typically slices of meat and or slices of cheese. Although there may be other contents, including sliced vegetables, included in a sandwich is rarely, if ever, served with rice or beans in between the slices of bread. A sandwich is typically served cold. What I would make the point of is that it is using the word generally, typically, or generally and typically. It does not include all the things that we would, under a common sense view, recognize as a sandwich. For example, peanut butter and jelly are not listed inside of this affidavit. Are we to then conclude that a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is not a sandwich? And then if we grant that, we must concede that what is typically the case is not a strict, narrow view. In addition, there are plenty of sandwiches that are served hot. In this affidavit, it suggests a sandwich is typically served cold. It does not exclude that a sandwich can be served hot. And so, by extension of this, we see that at the beginning, it's stated that it's generally recognized as 2 pieces of leavened bread, but that does not mean that it is always the case that it must be 2 pieces of leavened bread. To reject this is to say that any non-typical construction of a sandwich, that is to say if it's served hot, that is to say if it is not served with meat or cheese or sliced vegetables, that is to say that it is not 2 pieces of bread, must not be a sandwich. And to conclude that would be a highly narrow definition of sandwich, and I think would be opposed to the common sense view that most people have of sandwiches. And it would make it further unintelligible to discuss what is and is not a sandwich. Unless you have a point here, I would like to move on to a third counter-argument.
No. I was waiting for you to conclude your presentation of attack so I can move to defense.
Okay. As a third counter-argument, then.
No, in discussion, you have to go point by point because I can't keep track of all arguments. So
okay.
One point I defend that point to the conclusion, then second point I defend point to the conclusion, and that is a discussion. But if you want to present all arguments, I will have to write them down. I'm not a perfect memory.
That's all right. We'll follow the formal format. So please, please reply to that point.
First argument, I will just, for clarity's sake, so I don't misconstrued, is that in the definition of Minnesota Law Review as presented in the legal proceedings, sandwich-like and sandwich type, although being a distinct categorization, just because for the common sense argumentation that you presented, they are sufficiently similar to be considered in the common sense as sandwiches, disregarding the law definition, and you by that standard move to proceed to institute or emboss sandwich as a one piece of as presented by dictionaries. Is such so?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just say that although things can be similar, then distinct properties as defined by definitions make them different. To illustrate this point, in mathematics, there exists two distinct categorization I will be using because I already have a link present here. The first link presents path connection. The second link, I'll not link it because that's mathematics. If you wish, I can present it. Simple path connection versus complex path connection. That is a similar way of describing the reality of connectedness of a present
Is this
domain.
the same source from that you? Is this the same thing as the last citation you linked, mathinsight.org?
Yeah, those are simple presentations of what it means. It's not. I didn't want to make it mathematically complex because that is complex algebra, I think, or analytics. In the formal definition, it is like 3 rows of formality. Just don't, so that we don't complicate things. I use the simple definition to illustrate a point what is and isn't connected. And in the mathematics, there exists a different definition which is similar to the ongoing definition, but is categorically or definitively different from the ongoing definition because it is a subset of it, and it is simple path connected and complex path connected, which although similar cannot be induced as being the same, and as such should be viewed as different proponents of the, is such accepted, or do I need to further my explanation?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase it? Are you simply
Yes.
saying that complex connectedness and uncomplex connectedness are distinct?
No, I'm saying that there exists 2 different definitions of 2 different things which are similar in the nature to what they describe. Simple path connectedness versus complex path connectedness describes the connectedness of a domain, but in situations in which the domain is pinned, it has a hole in it, for example, or some other breakpoint in it, that means that it is complexly connected. But simple connectedness is a full domain with no holes or similar things, but in a different definition which describes exact similar thing, which is connectedness of a domain, path connected means that it and path disconnected present different things. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
They are similar in nature, but are distinct by definition of what they describe, although their nature of what they describe is somewhat similar, but they are distinct in a way. I hope I presented it qualified. So to move to the sandwich dilemma you presented, just because they are sandwich-like or sandwich type, in the law, what I would assume by the definition of it is that they are a distinct presentation of the natural phenomena, which is a sandwich, the natural construction, which is a sandwich, and it is similar in nature to it, but because of what it describes a specified part of it which is distinct for a complex or all-encompassing definition of a sandwich. Make sense?
Can you rephrase just the last part?
Yes.
That they are distinct but similar, and you're saying that's not sufficient to qualify the similarity as a sandwich.
I think I misworded that, my apologies. So sandwich-like and sandwich type are by their nature and sandwiches. Sandwich-like, sandwich type, and sandwiches are both representations of a natural construct, human construct that is, that presents a certain domain, let's say. is such acceptable.
What do you mean by domain?
It's a mathematical language. An X. We can take in an X. X.
Oh,
is
some
what is
set
represented.
of
Categories, specifications, categories, or whatever. Characteristics.
domain in a mathematical sense. Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So both sandwich-like, sandwich type, and sandwiches all operate under the same domain.
Okay.
Let's say that is a domain. What that domain is, let's leave to ambiguity. But if you want, I can present what the domain could be. So even though sandwiches operate on the wholeness of the domain, or maybe not the wholeness of the domain, but a large chunk of that domain, the sandwich, let's say that they are 75% of the whole domain. Sandwich types and sandwich likes have some interconnection between what is a sandwich and what isn't a sandwich, making them similar but in a sense distinct,
Okay.
So let's say 70% of the domain is a sandwich. In that 70%, let's say that in a wholeness of the domain, sandwich type is 50%. By the definition of percentages, 20% must be, at least 20% must be in a combat connected both sandwich and sandwich type. Does that make sense? But they can also.
Where does the 20% number come from?
100 minus 50 and 70 units. You have a 100%. 70% of that is maximum a number of what is a sandwich in that domain. 50% is the domain of the sandwich type. Maximum percentage that can be distinct from the percentage of the sandwich is 30%. So the minimum presentation of connection or same domain of the sandwich and sandwich types is 20%.
May I interject?
Yeah, the area of the domain, minimum area of the domain in which they intersect is 20% in that presentation. Make sense?
What you're saying makes sense. What I'm not understanding is where you're attaining these values for crossover of domain.
They are just, I took numbers randomly. It doesn't have to be. I just defined the sandwich as something in the next domain, and then that domain, 70% of that domain, which is domain of similarity, which common sense refers to as sandwich, Domain is everything someone in common sense would refer to as sandwich, and then I'm inducing in that domain what sandwich is by its definition.
But you've moved to dismiss definitions.
I moved to dismiss definitions based on this dictionary and law ambiguity, and then I introduced a definition by the expert testimony. In expert testimony, I introduced a definition which states that what was it? A sandwich is of European and is generally recognized in our industry as two pieces of leavened bread. And your next argument point is the ambiguity of it. And if you wish, I can proceed to it. Just a small intro. Stop to tell you what you can do here. You can accept or decline my defense.
I accept that there is some greater domain that includes traditional sandwiches, sandwich types, and sandwich likes. I reject that traditional sandwiches are the only things that can be considered sandwiches. And in fact, I would move to say that the greater domain is the thing that we call sandwiches. This, as you put it, common sense definition of sandwich.
Yes.
What I would...
Your argumentation, yes. That is perfectly valid. But your attack against my position was the law definition, which states that similar things cannot be distinct. And I was attacking that from the mathematical standpoint of domain interconnectedness. So two things can be similar and distinct in in what they present, Similar but distinct is a sort of a contradiction, but I don't have a better word, so I hope you understand what I'm saying.
I understand. That makes sense.
Okay.
I would accept that point, and then I would move to say that similarity is sufficient to give it categorization within the domain. And within the greater domain is, I think, a better common sense definition of sandwich.
So just so I can formalize it to me that I don't misinterpret, is your argumentation is that sandwich types and sandwich, what was it? Sandwich type and the other, sandwich-like, are sufficiently similar to be considered sandwiches?
I'm conceding that they are not traditional sandwiches, but I am saying that anything included in the greater domain that you referenced earlier is a sandwich. Yes.
Okay.
And if you are to reject that, then what I would do is challenge you to provide me a categorization for the folded bread food item that I gave in my second argument.
What would be a folded item that would be distinct from a sandwich that is folded?
Yes, what would you categorize a connected single piece of bread folded with peanut butter inside of it?
It's already defined in the law as sandwich-like and sandwich-type, distinct, similar but removed parts of the whole. So hot dogs.
So when you speak, do you say I'm going to make a peanut butter sandwich-like?
I don't.
Do you say a peanut butter sandwich type?
Nope.
What is it that you say?
I'm gonna make a sandwich.
Okay.
You're now referring to the usage, which doesn't have to correlate with precise usage. For example, many people use Machiavellian to represent some great conniving whatever, but it could be used as a benevolent learning experience or something else. There are multiple definitions by which you can go, and law definitions don't have to or precise definitions don't actually have to strictly correlate to its use in the nation. For example, in my language, there doesn't exist a word for gender. Or I was Googling it and I couldn't find it. Maybe there exists, but by my research or whatever, I couldn't find it. So when I am referring to gender in my language, I'm actually referring to sex as well in the similar way. Context are you following what I'm saying, or should I rephrase a bit?
I'm following.
Okay. So just because a definition is not followed, or law definition is not followed, doesn't mean that law definition or definition of the word is any less valid. That's my point. Accept or decline, I guess? Or should I clarify it more?
I accept the point that you're making is true, but I don't accept it as relevant to the discussion on sandwich categorization. And I'll explain why. If you have moved to dismiss specific definitions from certain dictionaries based on ambiguity,
yes,
I would move to make the same categorization from the third point in the affidavit given. Because it uses
just a second. Okay. Go ahead. I'm prepared.
Because so you have made this distinction between a proper legal usage and a common usage. And I accept that those things are distinct. But if we have moved to dismiss dictionary definitions based on the ambiguity of these definitions, then I would make the same motion to dismiss the third point in the affidavit as ambiguous, because it is saying that something is generally recognized, and it is saying that it typically contains, because it's using specific wording that is not exhaustive of all the possibilities, then it still contains enough ambiguity that these definitions are not going to be precise enough to distinguish them from usage. In addition, and as a segue to the second point, something being generally recognized in an industry is similar to what we would call general usage in colloquial terms. So because you have stated that if I had this folded bread, peanut butter containing a food item, because you've said that that is a sandwich, you are recognizing it as a sandwich on a colloquial sense. And to reference an ambiguous definition inside of a legal affidavit doesn't seem to remedy that problem.
Oh, may I?
Yes.
Okay. I acknowledge and accept the ambiguity of the third point in the affidavit, but move to present that its ambiguity of the complete definition is not relevant to the proceedings, because only thing that is relevant from my definition or my argumentation is that it is two pieces or more of bread, and in a definition there states generally recognized, which you pointed as unjustly ambiguous. I would like to present that European and historical evidence is by general nature, as Europe is a large area and in which reside many different ethnicities, peoples, and cultures. And because of the long and expensive history of it, the generally recognized is just a presentation of possible faultness or falsehood as a way of protecting himself from the persecution of specific cultures and ethnicities which have a different definition for a sandwich. But in Europe, as a general rule, which I stated, I believe, in my argumentation, is that because it is generally presented as this in an area such and contextually in the context of environment presented, I would say that general recognition serves as a valid presentation of the definition in the affidavit. Is such acceptable or is such not?
I have a follow-up question. If general recognition is sufficient for this, why is common recognition of a folded bread, peanut butter containing food item as a sandwich not acceptable?
Why is a common definition used by people not acceptable to the definition in our case? Is that a question?
Yes. Why is general recognition the citation for the two pieces of bread criteria, but general recognition is not sufficient to say that a folded bread is a sandwich not acceptable?
Okay, I will use three different points to describe this, if I may. It will be short, so you don't have to pause it. First, I don't know anyone who goes, I'm going to go to buy a hot dog sandwich. We just go say, I'm going to buy a hot dog, or I'm going to buy a Frankfurter, or similar of nature. So in common usage, hot dog would not be a sandwich, but maybe, I'm not entirely sure, I don't have data. Second point is that I couldn't find, and you didn't present any data for common usage except our mutual anecdotal evidence, which I would move to dismiss as anecdotal evidence. And the third point is that in the affidavit, the presenter is a qualified expert in the field, and in a common usage, such expertise are not common, I guess, would be the word. And with this, those are my 3 points, so you can proceed with your attack.
Well, to rebut the first point, we also don't say we're going to get, we are also accept that we would just say, I'm going to get a Reuben, and a Reuben is a kind of sandwich, and that's accepted.
Okay.
So we can use a specific term for a kind of sandwich without using the word sandwich after it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't recognize it as a sandwich. As to the second point for dismissing anecdotal evidence, I'll grant this, but I would note that if you would refer to it as a sandwich and I would refer to it as a sandwich, is there a necessity for data on what is considered a sandwich? because we've already opened the discussion and there's not space to include another source, then I have to concede this point. But I do suspect that most people would consider a hot dog a sandwich if it was pulled. To this third, you can what?
As this is a good-hearted debate, I will concede to that point and proceed to put the common sense analogy as valid, meaning that you can use the common analogy that everyone thinks what is a sandwich as a sandwich.
Okay. Thank you. As to the third point, I recognize that there is some expertise inside of this affidavit in describing what is recognized as a sandwich. What I would move to is that his criteria for a general recognition is indistinguishable from a common usage view for what is recognized.
Are you
in
saying
the same?
What? Oh, sorry.
Well, ask your question. I can probably answer more directly, knowing what your question is.
Are you saying that he considers a sandwich in the same way that the common use is?
Yes. He states
Then do you concede
it's generally recognized in our industry
as two pieces of bread?
Right.
So
what I'm saying is his criteria for general recognition is the same as a common use definition for general recognition by the public.
Okay, I will have to steelman this a bit. Are you saying conclusively that a sandwich in general usage and by the testimony in the affidavit consists of two or more pieces of bread? Is a food item which consists of two or more pieces of bread?
I concede that is what he's saying here. My point is that he's using a criteria that's the same. Mm-hmm. He's in the sense that he is basing it off of general recognition.
So general recognition of a sandwich is that it is a food product, food construction, consisting of two or more pieces of bread.
That is what this person is saying in this affidavit. That's true.
Okay, but is it a common usage?
Well, what does seem to be common usage is that a piece of bread folded in half with peanut butter inside is considered a sandwich. Is your contention that this affidavit demonstrates that this would not be generally recognized as a sandwich?
My point would be, yes, that one piece of bread folded would, by the definition presented in the affidavit, not be considered a sandwich. No. Yes.
Okay. Then it seems what's needed is some empirical data on whether a half piece of bread or a piece of bread folded in half containing peanut butter is considered a sandwich or not. I would also like to present the idea that by the definition given by this expert, that a peanut butter and jelly sandwich would not be considered a sandwich because it is not slices of meat or cheese or sliced vegetables.
Yes, by his definition, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which consists of solely one piece of bread, would not be considered a sandwich.
Okay.
By his definition.
Would it also be the case that any sandwich served hot, or anything that we call a sandwich that is served hot, would not be considered a sandwich, according to this affidavit?
If anything, can you repeat that? Apologies.
According to this affidavit, would this person consider, let's say, a hot Reuben sandwich or any other kind of sandwich that's been heated up, would they consider that a sandwich or not based on this definition?
Possibly, because he states that it is typically served cold, but by the probability of his explanation, it would not be, let's say it like that. So it could be, but without added specifications on his part on the temperature or whatever he said. A food product, it would not serve as a conclusive answer from me. I could not present a conclusive answer. I hope that suffices. I can
If that's the answer, it'll have to suffice.
I can concede a bit that in his wording, a hot sandwich would not a hot food product, which is not classified as a sandwich or would not be a sandwich. Yes, by certainty or typicality.
Okay.
Does
So
this suffice?
would it fall? That suffices. I have a follow-up
Mhm.
question. Would it then become a sandwich-like or sandwich type?
I'm not sure. I haven't investigated the qualifications for a sandwich type and sandwich like because they're not really mandatory for my definition. Removal of definitions in sandwiches.
I see.
Maybe sandwich type, I guess.
Well, then I think I'd have the same contention. I'd have the same view. That being the case, there are things that are sandwich types that we do regularly refer to as sandwiches. And what I would then pose to you as a question is, what would you categorize the greater domain that contains traditional sandwiches, sandwich likes, and sandwich types?
How would I attribute a domain which consists of all of these?
Yes, the domain that we referred to earlier.
I will present a definition on top of my head. So if you have any ambiguity, I can additionally add to it because I'm not completely sure. Is such acceptable?
Well, I think just to be clear, I'm not asking for a definition. What I'm asking for is what characteristics does this greater domain have that contains these three things?
I can present.
If a definition is that, then yes, that's fine.
I can present a couple of characteristics on top of my head, but because of I have not prepared extensively for a definition of what a sandwich domain would be, I reserve the right to add additional a couple of times, but not too many. Is such acceptable?
That's acceptable, yes.
Okay. So a sandwich domain which consists a domain which would consist of sandwich, sandwich type, and sandwich like would be categorized as a food product consisting and constructed by the usage of bread as its base and filled or added to by the external food items. Let's say it like that. Is that acceptable? What
do you mean external food items?
External because they are not bread.
Okay.
So vegetables, peanut butter or jelly or whatever, or ham or something like that. That in my presentation of definition would be an external addition to the base construction of the sandwich. So a sandwich by definition would be a construct made, bread made construct, which uses bread as a base and adds to it by specified external food items.
Okay. If you had to condense anything that fell into that category into a word, into it like or at least a simple phrase, what would you call that?
I apologize. I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase?
If you had to, in a phrase or a single word, give a name to the whole domain, what would you call that?
Can I use 3 words?
Yes.
Oh, maybe 2 words.
Yes, that's acceptable.
Bread constructs. I'm not really exactly sure, but most probably it would be something of the nature of bread constructed structure.
Okay.
I have to induce a food then in it. Because I can make a house then, and that would be considered a sandwich. I'm not really exactly sure how I would describe it in 3 words. I apologize.
That's all right.
I can think on it, and if I get a specific answer to that question, I can then answer it. But if I cannot follow up on. You can proceed with your different argumentations against my position. Because I don't have a concrete answer to a specific name for such a domain.
No, I'm content. I'm content with that, and
Okay.
I'd be interested in your thoughts on that at a later time. I think at this point I don't have any further argumentation to make. So I will give you the floor if there are any other points you'd like to make, and then I would move for closing statements.
Okay, before you do, I would like for you to present summation of your attacking position so I can see if I addressed every point adequately, if such is acceptable.
A summation of my initial arguments or a summation of my arguments after the fact?
Your summation of argumentations in an attacking position. So attacking arguments against my positions, such as you did with the ambiguity of law definition, things of such nature.
Yeah, so for an initial starter, in the same sense that you dismissed, you moved to dismiss definitions out of ambiguity, I made a similar motion to dismiss the precise definition given in the legal affidavit. I conceded that there was some greater domain of traditional sandwiches, sandwich types, and sandwich likes. I contended that this greater domain ought to be called sandwiches, as there are things that are sandwich types and likes that we colloquially refer to as sandwiches. And in addition, I made a point of saying that there were things that were colloquially considered sandwiches that the person in the affidavit would more than likely, we don't know for certain, but more than likely say are not sandwiches as generally recognized by the industry. However, the criteria that this person is using is general recognition in an industry, and I would contend that this is indistinguishable from general recognition by consumers for the food items they're eating.
Okay, so my first question to that would be, before I move to the attacking position, would be, did I present the sufficient defense for your point of dismissal of affidavit presented?
Can you rephrase the question?
Yes, of course. Do you still believe that affidavit should be removed as a definition because of ambiguity as a guiding definition? Well, let me rephrase that. I lost my train of thought. Apologies. Do you believe that the expert testimony in the affidavit should be dismissed because of ambiguity of the presented definitions in his third point?
I believe it should be dismissed as a strict standard, but I do not believe it should be dismissed as a guiding piece of information.
So let me just, for specification, ask you this. Do you believe that I can induce or emboss a definition for this conversation as a leading definition, which would state that a sandwich is a food product consisting of 2 pieces of bread or more? If
included inside of your embossment is that this is a traditional sandwich, then I think that is sufficient. Yeah.
I will have to ask additional question here. Do you then reject, because if I say that, just a second. So you're saying that what he is explaining is a form called traditional sandwich, but a greater domain of a sandwich, which would encompass hot dogs, frankfurters, and similar products, is not presented here.
That is not presented here with the specific criteria of 2 pieces of bread. But
okay,
what I would
you distinguish a traditional sandwich from a sandwich, and
yes.
By his presentation, which states explicitly that he is explaining what a sandwich is, you would dismiss this as a general rule or embossed definition for this conversation. Am I correct?
What do you mean dismiss it as a general rule? I would dismiss it as a criteria for all sandwiches. I would accept it as a criteria for traditional sandwiches.
That's all I wanted to know. Okay, I will. So okay. I will say that I conclude in this first point that you and I have not reached a concession of point, and will leave this judgment to the judging body, if that is all right with you.
Yes, that's all right with me.
Okay, can you repeat your second point?
The second counter argument point.
Yes.
I didn't write it down. Hold on.
Okay, no worries.
It was that there are things within the greater domain, outside of traditional sandwich, that you and I both recognize as sandwiches, such as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or this folded piece of bread containing peanut butter.
Okay. I would like to just solidify the stance. Would you consider a folded pizza a sandwich?
I would.
Okay, so anything constructed of bread in a form with fillings and such for you would be a sandwich.
Yes.
Okay. By my definition, which is not them both. Okay, I move to leave this to the judging body as well. Is such accepted?
That's accepted.
And your third point was?
The third point is that the criteria that the legal affidavit is using is functionally. Sorry?
Apologies. I totally misinterpreted your second point. Did you say that a common usage of that in the domain there exist things which commonly would be considered a sandwich but are not? Which in common usage would be considered a sandwich, but by the definition and both by the law definition and affidavit would not be, such as sandwich type and sandwich like.
Right.
Okay. Yes. And you are saying that the common usage of folded pizza is we call it sandwich. Maybe we don't call it a sandwich, but we think of it as a sandwich.
I don't think I made a point about pizza, except to answer your question.
This is my formal attack on your opposition.
Can you rephrase the attack then?
Okay, of course. So in your presentation against in your presentation of attacking argumentation, you stated, if I recall correctly, I don't want to misinterpret you, you said that common usage of certain things that are not by law definitions embossed by me and affidavit are commonly referred to sandwiches, but by the definition they are not.
By the definition of traditional sandwiches, that are not. I conceded that.
Okay.
The point that I made was that there are things outside of the definition of traditional sandwiches that are still considered sandwiches in common usage, and as such, it means that things that are outside of traditional sandwiches aren't automatically not sandwiches.
Okay. Do you think in common usage folded pizza is considered a sandwich?
No.
Okay, then we can proceed from the second point. The third point, you can present it.
The third point is simply to say that in the affidavit, the criteria is general recognition by the industry. It's my view that this is indistinguishable from general recognition by the public of what a sandwich is.
Okay, but just for added specification, so I don't run with the definition, you are saying that in his third point, he is referring to a traditional sandwich, not all sandwiches.
That's correct. I do not think that common usage only refers to traditional sandwiches, though.
Okay, that's completely fair. I will move this to the judgment of the judging body as well. Is such acceptable?
That's acceptable.
Okay, now I'm formally concluding the attack on your opposition and can move to the attack on your as an attacking body and you as a defensive body of your formal argumentations. Can you present your first argument?
I'm confused. I thought I just did this.
I was attacking your opposition. You were an attacking body, and you attacked my argumentations, and I was attacking your, just to solidify the presentation and summation, so I know what was said in formality, that I didn't miss anything.
Okay, so what is it
You
that I'm
had
saying
two
now?
formal arguments in your opening statement. In your presentation of arguments, you had two formal argumentations. One was definition, and second was common usage.
You're just asking me to review the two core arguments?
Yes, now that is, but I think we already passed that argumentation, and I was about to conclude in my attacking without any presentation of attacking argumentation, because I think we sufficiently went through the your formal argumentation, presentation of argumentation. Makes sense, or should I explain further? Hello? Does anybody else hear me?
No, I think he's cutting out.
Oh, okay. We'll wait for him. Sure. I still don't hear you.
Yeah, you're unmuted. It's just that we still can't hear you.
Hello?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. I had a message at the beginning. I wasn't sure if that was done automatically. Okay. So was there further points that needed to be made before we move on to closing statements?
I was just formally concluding my the part of the structure. I think we can move to closing statements if such is allowed.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
You know the formal rules better than I, so you'll know what's allowed.
Yeah. No, I was referring to if you accept the procedure that we can proceed to the closing statements.
I accept your motion. Would you like me to make my closing statement first?
By all means, I'll mute myself now.
Okay, let me double check the rules that you've sent me for closing statement. Okay. I would just like to conclude by stating that a half or a folded bread containing peanut butter containing item is considered a sandwich by me. It was considered a sandwich by my opposition, and that there was not a sufficient there is not a clear and concise definition or categorization for the greater domain of traditional sandwiches, sandwich types, and sandwich likes. And as such, I would make the case, or I would contend that anything that's included in this domain ought to be considered a sandwich, based on common sense usage of sandwiches falling outside of traditional sandwiches on their own. I leave the decision for this to the judging body. And with that, I conclude my opening statement and give the floor to my opposition for their closing statement.
So, in my formal presentation of the closing statement, I would like to note that we didn't reach a formal consensus in our proceedings. So, I will present short argumentation in my stance. My stance was solely dismissal of definitions by dictionaries and law because of ambiguity, which I hope I presented adequately. Then I moved to present affidavit of an acclaimed expert in the field, which served to show that the leading definition which would serve my argumentation is that two pieces of bread are what a sandwich is considered, and that by that definition, hot dog, which is consistent of one piece of bread, does not fall under that definition. My opposition made claims about ambiguity in the affidavit and in the law review, and I don't believe either of us reached a conclusive end, and as such, I would will leave the judgment on the part of the judging body. I formally thank my opposition for an excellent presentation of etiquette and reason. I had a much. This was an amazing experience, and I hope we see each other again at another debate. And with this, I conclude my closing statement and leave the moderation body to their closure. Goodbye.
So, thank you guys for debating. Awesome debate. So since we got no concession from either party, we will have a vote. You two, which voting poll would you like? The 3-question one or the direct one?
I'm content with either. With whichever the judging body decides is the best, I'll accept the judgment.
Yeah, I don't contest that.
Okay. I think we can go with 3-question one. I think we get more clarity through that one. So I think everyone besides unknown can vote, because you can vote if you were here for 75% of the time. Stone, you can't vote either. Okay, so I'm gonna post the poll now.
Yeah, and I guess while you do that, I'll just move everyone to Serious Saloon in case there wants to be a post-debate discussion.
Sisyphus, that was amazing. I couldn't even tell that it was your first time. You did
Thank you.
really well. Amazing showing of etiquette. I was this close on many points to concession of points. You had me, but you didn't push enough. I was this close. I was holding my hand on the button, but I was saying no, just a bit more, just a bit more. It was amazing showing. Well done, well done.
Thank you. I thought you did much better than I did. I thought I thought you systematically dismantled every point that I came up with. So I was a bit left with challenging how you categorize the whole domain, and
Yeah,
I don't think I was. This is just me not knowing how to formally put together all the points that I made. But you did your conclusion, and you were like, oh, and